They'll trade me at dawn, but I can cook, so, clean. I'll be whatever you need," pleaded the Comanche girl. The prairie was still, painted in dusky shades of violet as the sun sank behind the hills. The night carried a heavy silence, broken only by the crackle of a campfire in the distance. Tethered horses shifted restlessly, and in the glow of flickering flames, the Comanche camp bustled with subdued activity. Tomorrow was a day of trade, some bartering for rifles, some for cattle, others for horses. But for one young girl, it meant her freedom would be exchanged like any other possession. Naeli sat with her arms bound loosely before her, the elder women whispering around her as if her fate were already sealed. She had seen girls like her traded before, sometimes for cloth, sometimes for whiskey. She was barely 17, her long dark hair tangled with the wind, her eyes fierce yet glistening with unshed tears. In the shadows of the camp, she overheard the men speaking. Her uncle, who claimed rights over her since her father's death, was determined to see her handed to strangers. "At dawn," he had said, "the white traders will pay. She will fetch a good price." But Naeli's heart burned with rebellion. She was no cattle to be sold. Her mother had taught her to cook, sew, mend, and work with steady hands. Her grandmother had taught her stories of courage. Yet none of those skills could buy her freedom here. As the camp quieted, she slipped away from the women's circle, her bare feet carrying her toward the edge of the tall grass. Her wrists stung where the rope rubbed raw, but she pushed forward until the campfire was a faint glow behind her. There, beneath the canopy of stars, she saw him. The rancher stood by his horse, tightening the saddle as if preparing to ride through the night. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his hat low against the wind. His face was worn from years of sun and toil, but his eyes carried the quiet strength of a man who had seen both loss and endurance. She had glimpsed him earlier, riding with the traders. Unlike the others, he hadn't looked at her like property. He'd looked at her like a person. Summoning every shred of courage, Naeli stepped forward. Her voice trembled but did not break. "They'll trade me at dawn," she whispered, her words quick and desperate. "But I can cook, so, clean. I'll be anything you need. Just don't let them sell me." The rancher froze, his hand still on the reins. His gaze met hers, steady and unreadable. For a long moment, the prairie seemed to hold its breath. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, gruff, but not unkind. "Girl, you don't know what you're a-skinned." "I do," she said fiercely, her chin lifting despite the tremble in her lips. "Better to belong to one man than to be passed around like a sack of grain. You have a house, a fire, a place for me to work. I can earn my keep. Please." The rancher studied her, seeing both the fire and the fear in her eyes. He had lost his wife 3 winters ago, leaving him with a young daughter and a house that echoed with loneliness. He had sworn never to take another woman, not out of lack of desire, but out of grief that clung like chains. Yet here stood this girl, offering herself not out of love, but out of desperation. Something in his chest tightened. "You're too young," he muttered. "I'm old enough to work," she shot back. "You don't even know my name." "I don't need to. I just need a chance." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft whinny of his horse. Finally, he exhaled, long and heavy. "If I take you," he said slowly, "there's no turning back. You'll be mine, not like they mean, but under my roof, my rules. You'll work hard. You'll mind me. And I don't want lies. You understand." Her heart leapt, her eyes shining with sudden hope. She nodded quickly. "Yes, I understand. I swear it." The rancher looked toward the Comanche camp, firelight glowing faint against the horizon. By dawn, men would come looking. By dawn, she would no longer be free to choose. With a sharp tug, he untied the rope from her wrists. Her skin bore angry red marks, but she didn't flinch. She only whispered, "Thank you." He mounted his horse, then reached a calloused hand down to her. For a heartbeat she hesitated, then she placed her small hand in his. He pulled her up behind him, and together they rode into the night, the stars their only witnesses. Naeli clung to him, not in fear, but in fragile hope. For the first time in weeks, she felt the stirrings of safety. The rancher's jaw was set as he urged the horse forward. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. All he knew was that he couldn't leave her behind. And so, beneath the endless sky, their story began. The rancher's choice. The horse carried them through the open prairie until the horizon softened with the glow of first light. Naeli's head rested against the rancher's back, the rhythm of hooves lulling her into a half-dream where fear and relief mingled. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring, only that she was no longer bound to the fate her uncle had chosen for her. By the time they reached his homestead, the eastern sky had begun to pale. A modest cabin stood against the rolling hills, its roof weathered, its fence sturdy though mended many times. Chickens stirred in the yard, and smoke from the dying embers of last night's fire curled from the chimney. A small voice called from the doorway. "Papa!" A girl of 8 stood there, her nightdress rumpled, her dark hair falling over sleepy eyes. She rubbed her face, then blinked at the sight of Naeli perched behind her father. The rancher dismounted and helped Naeli down, his hand steady though his mind raced with questions of what he had just done. He turned to the little one. "Go on inside, Clara. It's early still." But Clara tilted her head, eyes curious. "Who's that?" The rancher glanced at Naeli, who stood barefoot in the dirt, her wrists raw but her chin held high. He sighed. "This here's someone who needed help." Naeli, unsure whether to bow or speak, simply pressed a hand over her chest and whispered, "Naeli." Clara studied her a moment longer before her face softened into a small, welcoming smile. "You can come in. Papa makes pancakes when someone new comes." The rancher's lips twitched, half amusement, half weariness. "That's a rare thing, Clara." Inside the cabin, the warmth of the hearth wrapped around Naeli like a blanket. The walls bore the marks of a woman's touch long faded, quilts neatly folded, shelves lined with simple crockery. Yet there was a hollowness too, the kind that comes when laughter has long gone silent. While the rancher stoked the fire, Naeli quietly rolled up her sleeves and stepped into the kitchen space. She moved with practiced hands, gathering flour, water, and the little provisions she found. She didn't ask, she simply worked, as though proving her worth before the words could be spoken. The rancher watched, leaning against the doorway. Something in her determination unsettled him, not because it was unwelcome, but because it reminded him of his late wife, the same way she had stepped into his life, unafraid to take charge of a home. Clara, delighted, set the table and whispered, "Papa, she's nice. Can she stay?" He gave no answer. When they sat down to eat, Naeli barely touched her food, waiting instead until the others had filled their plates. It was an instinct, born of caution. Clara noticed and pushed half her pancake toward her. "You should eat too." For the first time, Naeli's lips curved into a faint smile. Later that day, while Clara played with a rag doll on the porch, the rancher led Naeli outside. They stood by the corral, wind brushing across the tall grass. "You know they'll come looking," he said, his voice low. "I know," she replied, eyes steady. "But I won't go back. I'll work for you. I'll sew your clothes, cook your meals, tend your land. Just don't give me back." He studied her, his weathered face unreadable. "You're not a slave, girl. I don't aim to own you." "Then let me belong by choice," she said firmly. "Let me stay, even if it means nothing more than a roof and work to do." The rancher's chest tightened at her words. He had built his life on hard soil and harder loss, but here was someone offering loyalty before he had even asked for it. He saw no guile in her eyes, only a desperate, stubborn hope. "All right," he said finally. "You'll stay. But not as property. Not as trade. You'll stay because I'll give you shelter. And because Clara's taken to you already." Naeli exhaled, relief flooding her face. She bowed her head, whispering, "Thank you." But the rancher wasn't finished. He tilted his hat back, his gaze sharp. "You'll work hard. There'll be no lies, no secrets. If trouble comes—" he paused, glancing toward the horizon where the Comanche camp lay miles away, "you'll stand with this family. Can you promise that?" Naeli lifted her chin. "I promise." That night, as the stars blanketed the prairie, the rancher sat on the porch with Clara asleep in his lap. Naeli sat a little apart, mending a tear in one of his shirts by lantern light. He watched her hands move, swift and steady, and wondered what twist of fate had brought her here. She was still a stranger, yet already she was stitching herself into the fabric of his life. And though he did not say it aloud, a thought settled in his heart with quiet certainty. Perhaps saving her had saved him too.